Alright, so now we're preparing for the final stages of the car before it goes to paint. This is the final prep work. I want to point out something to you first of all. When you're spraying primer, you want to make sure your area that you're spraying it in is warm. So you want to have it at 70 degrees. I have it at 75 because I'm a southerner in Michigan. So that the particles of paint that you're painting with, they don't clump up. It's not big particles, it's fine. It gives an overall better finish. And so now I'm going to demonstrate two things to you. So if you look here, this is my last spray. This is just about ready. This panel, I'm doing it kind of panel by panel, is about ready to go to paint. You see I got my line really straight. If you look down here, you see that body is perfectly good now. It's well prepared and good to go. And this is spraying after 320 grit. If you look here, this is still ashy because this has been gone over with a 320 grit and it's ready for paint. So if you look here, you want to again close your eyes, feel across, make sure you don't feel anything at all. Make sure it feels all in unison, one block, one piece, no nipples, no dimps, no nothing at all in the paint. And that's what we have here. So what I'm going to bring you to is up here. So if you still see swirl marks, if you still see scratches or anything in the finish, if it's not all flat, I would say go with your 220 grit sandpaper, okay? Sand it down, make sure everything is completely dry because this sandpaper will clot up really quickly with the primer if it's still wet at all. So will the others. So, and then once you go over the 220 to break it down, to get that real finish that you're looking for, so that make sure everything is completely smooth and ready for paint, you want to go with the 320. So if you're not familiar with sandpaper, of course, you know the lower numbers means it's going to be grittier, it's going to be harder, it's going to cut down into the body, into the Bondo or anything you have a lot quicker, but it's not going to be great for the finished look because you're going to have scratches through it. So you want to start low, then go high. So with 320 here, this is just enough because primer itself is a filler. So if you still see some scratch marks, you see some imperfection, that's fine. The filler itself is the primer, and it's going to make everything look flat, and it's going to really make that base coat go on very smoothly, and then when you put the gloss over, it's going to do the finish. Now when you do the 320 and even this one, you're going to get these like clumps almost in it, right? You're going to get these bigger clumps of paint that you've just shaved off, and it's going to, when you're scratching against it, going to look very inconsistent. What I do is I take this right here and I just scrape those off a little bit, okay? And it is good enough to preserve the sandpaper so it still works just fine. So I just want to give you guys an update of what we got going on. This lower part right here is just about done and complete. This upper part needs to be done because this is with the 320 sand grit. We're going to do it again. Block up, break it down, block up, break it down, and we're getting there, guys. Okay, so we're working on the hood of the car, and there's some high spots, particularly because the car, basically it had the hood up for I think some years as it was being stored outside. So the car, the hood developed some fault lines in particular. So I'm going through this repair. This particular area was high, and so what I actually had to do was knock it back down some. And what I did is I kind of took a hammer into here, kind of cleared some of it, and I filled it in with Bondo because it was the easiest way to do it. But what I want to take you through is just some visual aids and help. So you see this here, this actually feels pretty smooth to the touch, but it's still a little high. But what tells me that I would see something in my imperfection in my paint here is you see all the white, and then you see the dark. That means when I take this over it, and I'm going over it, that I'm not reaching the dark part of this, okay? Since I'm not reaching the dark part, it means that these areas are higher than this is, which will create a dent or dimple look when it's time to get painted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep sanding down until I get a very flush white across this whole area. Then I'm going to go through the finger test again to just kind of feel through the feel test. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and spray it with some primer, and you can, because this primer is wet, you can kind of look at it off of the offset and you can get an idea of what your finished look would be like with paint. So just want to show you this. Again, you want to pay attention to the colors as they fade across to tell you visually what actually is happening. Alright, so we're back. We're taking a look at the work we're done. We saw that we shallowed out a lot of this area. This area right here is still a little bit dark, but man, it passes the field test quite well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spray actually we're actually going to go ahead and spray right now. And again, we're using spraying it to measure exactly where we are. So sorry for the focus, it keeps going in and out, but come on, autofocus. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to kind of look off a little bit. And we see we still have a little bit more work to do, but it's looking much better than how it was before. It's going to require this to dry, and it's looking pretty good. And then we're going to go back and sand it with the 320 grit, and that should pretty much take care of us from there. But that's looking a whole lot better than it was. You could kind of see the silhouette a little bit of the Bondo, but when I go back with the 320 grit and I sand it down some and respray it, it should all disappear. Okay, so this is after the 320 sand grit, sandpaper all over it, just to make sure everything looks good. It looks pretty great. But now I'm going to go ahead and spray it one more time so we can get a good look at how everything looks, especially what the reflection looks like. I'm going to be liberal with this a little bit. See there? A little bit of work left, but that looks pretty darn good. Alright, so a couple things are still drying, but this is an overall conclusion. As you can see, we got that area knocked out. Looks like it's pretty good. Still got some other areas on the hood to attend to that we're looking at, but remember, we're right up there, and now everything looks like it falls in unison very well. The lines are looking pretty clean on this thing, and we're getting towards completion. Thanks again for watching. This is just a quick update to the Porsche project. More coming soon.